Hi everyone, my name is Michael Demarco, and today I would like to give you an introduction to App Harbour, and I would like to show you how App Harbour can be used with Git Hub and continuous deployment. So in this presentation, first I'm going to talk to you about why I had to search for App Harbour and my case for doing so. Then I'll speak to you a bit about what App Harbour actually is. I'll also go a bit into units and pricing for App Harbour. And then I'll talk to you about a scenario for deploying to App Harbour and what App Harbour looks like at runtime. Last, I'll give you a short demo of how I've actually used App Harbour in development situation. So first with my case. So I'm a developer. I program using the Microsoft stack, using ASP.NET. I would like to deploy a website which I've developed to the internet, and I want this website to be available for people to access. I'm using Git Hub for my source control, and I'm also using an SQL Server database. I also want to have the facility of deploying my application without having to pay for it. So I might want to pay for it later on, but not initially. I've used Heroku for PHP development, and I like the concept that it has a free tier, and the thing is I cannot use Heroku with .NET unless I'm using Mono. So I would like to find something that would address my requirements for .NET. And that is how I came across App Harbour. So what App Harbour actually is, it's a platform as a service for .NET. So it will host your application and run everything for you, and you just need to worry about your .NET application. It's got a very large and versatile user base, so there are many people using App Harbour for small personal web apps, and also large companies with a high amount of traffic that are using App Harbour. And lastly, App Harbour allows you to deploy and scale your application. So you can start off small, and then you can ramp up and add processing power to your website. You can also add on many different plugins at the click of a button. So a bit about units and pricing, and this is what the pricing looks like for App Harbour. I was actually only interested in the canoe initially because I wanted something free, and as you can see, the canoe gives you one worker unit. Now with this worker unit you can have multiple applications, and the good thing about it is that each application can have a single database. So you can have 10 applications and 10 SQL Server instances running without having to pay for them. And you can also use Piggyback SSL. So App Harbour allows you to have SSL included on your website for free using the App Harbour hostname. So it would be https://yourwebsite.appharbor.com. Now a bit about the application deployment. So as you can see in the slide, which is taken from the official App Harbour website, you have your development phase where you're writing your application, and once that's done you want to deploy it. So what you do is you deploy using your favorite tool, and you can deploy to a source code repository or directly to App Harbour. But you will push your code to the source control, and what App Harbour will actually do is it will realize that you've pushed a code change. It will grab that code, run the tests on it, and if it succeeded, it will then push the new changes to the servers. And if it failed, it will notify you in the log that it has failed, and it won't deploy anything. So next, during the runtime, so once your application is up and running, App Harbour will automatically manage the load balancing for you. However, of course, on the free tier, where you have just one worker process, you do not have this load balancing. But if you're scaling up, then App Harbour will automatically manage spinning up your processes so that they'll perform optimally. And you can have a look at these slides on the official website. They're actually interactive and very well explained. Okay, so that was a bit about App Harbour. Now I'm going to explain to you about the demo and what I'll be showing you. So in the demo, I've got this application which I've written, and it's written in ASP.NET. It's using John Papa Hot Towel framework, and it's using an SQL database. So I'm going to store my source code on Git Hub, and from there I would like to deploy it to App Harbour. I would also like to have a database on App Harbour, so I'm going to take you through how that can be set up. And then I would like to access the website from my client, and I'd also like to access the database using Microsoft SQL Management Studio. So I'm going to take you through all this in a moment. So over here, this is my application. I've got a web UI project, which is the ASP.NET code. I've got a data layer and a domain layer, and I've also got a couple of tests. And this application is hosted on GitHub. I'll just open that up in a moment. GitHub. So I've got this application hosted over here on MDSPA on GitHub, Mike ZDM MDSPA. So you can see I'm publishing, whenever I commit changes and push my code, I'll be updating it in GitHub. So now I want to have this application running on App Harbour. So what I'm going to do is go to App Harbour, and I've already registered and signed in, and I'm going to create a new application. So let's call this application Fire Boot Camp 01. Gonna host it in the US and create new. Okay, I think my login has expired, so resubmit the login. Try that again with number 2. Okay, number 2 was fine. Right, so here I've created an empty application, and I want to connect this to my GitHub repository. So I'm going to click here, configure GitHub. And this is going to connect to my GitHub repository, which I've already connected to previously, so it already knows how to log in. And it's showing me my repositories here. I'm going to select MDSPA, click on Add, and App Harbour has now connected my application with GitHub. So next, I know my application is using an SQL database. So I would like to add that to my app. I'm going to click on Add-ons, and I'm going to look for, I don't want a dedicated SQL database because that costs $200 per month, which I don't want to pay. So I'm going to look for the shared free version, which is called Yocto. And I'm going to add this to my application. So as you can see, in the add-ons page, there's a big list of add-ons. Some of them are free, some you need to pay for. Some you can start off with a free version and then ramp up. And there's a lot of different stuff you can do here. There's queuing, such as this Iron MQ. And yeah, something for logging here. So you can have a look around and see what you'd like to try. So I'm going back to my application. And we can see here that it's installed SQL Server for me. So next, I'd like to give it some configuration. So I'm going to go to my server. And I'm going to give it a connection alias. Now this is the connection which I'm using inside my web config. So inside my web config, the connection string is called default connection. So I will go here. I need to click on edit first. So now my default connection is this SQL Server database. Now if I go back, my application hasn't actually been deployed yet. If I click on my application, it's just here, but it hasn't loaded up my GitHub repository yet. In order to do that, I'm going to need to commit a change. So that will trigger off the continuous deployment. So I'm going to go to my code, and I'm going to make a small change to my application. So I have an HTML file here. And I'm going to make a small change. Instead of save persons, I will write save details. Save that. And I like to use source tree for my source control. And I'm going to click on commit. So I'm going to add in the files which I have changed. I'm not going to upload my database. And I'm going to write a small comment. Changed save person to save details. So I've committed that, and I'm going to push the change up to GitHub. Click on OK. And that should have deployed my change to the GitHub repository. Now if I refresh on my application over here, we can see it's immediately picked up that a change has been made. And the status, as you can see, it's processing something, so it's queued. And right now it's loading my code, and it's also running the tests within the application. So while it does that, I'd like to show you how we could connect to our database. So if I go to my SQL server, over here it's giving us a host name and a username and password. So I could actually just copy this and go to SQL Server Management Studio, click on SQL Authentication, take in that username and password, and click Connect. And this should take us to our database on App Harbour. So at the moment we don't have anything in it because it's just being created. And if I expand the tables, there should be no application tables. Alright, so I'm going to go and check on my application now. Fire Bootcamp 02, and we can see that it is active and it's just been deployed. And if I click on this row, I can go in and see the log and see what has been done. So we can see it received a notification, downloaded the code, started the build, found a warning, which I'll need to go and have a look, but it's just a warning, so it didn't stop anything. Started the website, and then it executed the tests. Once the tests were okay, it deployed the build and everything was good. You can even go and drill down and see what tests have been done. So let's see if that actually works. So I'm going to click on Go to your application, and it's taking me to the default URL which has been set up, which is Fire Bootcamp 02 on App Harbour's domain. Now it's loading up for the first time, so it will be a bit slow. And hopefully soon we will see the application come up. This is what it's supposed to look like. So I'm expecting to see exactly the same thing here. And yeah, there we have it. It's loaded the application, and it's loaded up the people table. This doesn't have any data in it because it's newly deployed. And by the way, this is the hot towel Angular from John Papa with some small modifications to make it work with Entity Framework and SQL with an SQL Server database. So I'm going to go and try it out. If I click on Add Person, I should be able to add a person to the SQL database. So I'm going to quickly add someone. Jason Black, age is 20, and location is Sydney. Clicked on Add Person, and this guy has gone into the database. If I go to my SQL server now and click on Refresh, should have a table. So Entity Framework has connected and created a person table, and we can see it's created my record there. Click on the next person, Kim Brown. And it seems to be working pretty fine. Right, so that was the end of the demonstration. I've shown you my application deploying to GitHub, then GitHub deploying the application to App Harbour and how we could access it using a browser and accessing the database from SQL Server Management Studio. So finally, a recap on what we've spoken about in this presentation. I've explained to you why I wanted to look for something like App Harbour, and then I've shown you what App Harbour is, and talked a bit about the units and pricing. I've also described the deployment process and the runtime process, and then we had the demo demonstrating how we can use App Harbour with GitHub and continuous deployment. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, Paul.
How does this looks very similar to deploying Azure websites. How is this, are there any differences or things that you found that App Harbour does better than Azure?
Well, pardon?
Repeat the question.
So Paul has asked how this compares to Azure hosting and why I went for this solution instead of using something on Azure. So to answer your question, I think the main deciding factor is that I didn't need to enter any credit card details at any point, and I was quite happy about that. I mean, Azure has the free tier, but it will start charging you at some point, and you're not too sure when that's going to happen. So I was quite happy that I didn't need to register initially. There's also a feature that you can have multiple SQL databases. And on Azure, you can have one free database, and then the next databases you need to pay for. So that's also a deciding factor. There's also a blog post, and I can post you the link that kind of describes some more detailed items, but for me that was enough. Okay. Any more questions?
Who else can you, what other source repositories can you use to deploy from? You mentioned GitHub.
Yeah, on the site immediately. Sorry. So Duncan asked if we could use different repositories apart from GitHub. And on the site, when you create a new application, you have the option for Bitbucket, GitHub. You can also use App Harbour as your source repository. I'm not sure if there are any more, but those three definitely. And you can set up your application just immediately with App Harbour without using any source repositories.
So, in the beginning, you mentioned something regarding .NET and PHP.
Yes.
What was that? How did it fit in this thing?
Okay, so Eamon has asked a question about why I mentioned PHP initially, and that was in when I was explaining my case. So I've used a similar product called Heroku, which also offers hosting and platform as a service, but it's more oriented towards a Linux PHP kind of architecture, and it's not fully supportive of .NET. So I've used that in that environment while writing some PHP code, and I wanted to have something similar for .NET. So that's why I searched for App Harbour. Thank you for listening, guys.
Did you get all that? We'll take the SSW TV quiz and test your knowledge now.